Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? For today's video, I want to talk about the Julio Jones trade rumors and the potential fantasy football implications from a Julio Jones trade. So there have been rumors swirling around all offseason about Julio Jones being traded, but I kind of thought that if the Falcons committed to keeping Matt Ryan, we saw they restructured his contract, so it would be really hard to trade him. They did not draft a quarterback at the number 4 pick. So I thought if all that happened, they weren't going to deal Julio because I figured they were going to be in a win-now mode and you would want Julio on that team. But recently, trade talks have really heated up. It seems like the newly hired general manager, Terry Fontenot, views Julio Jones more as a nuisance to the cap space as opposed to a needed weapon to win now. And on Undisputed on Monday, Shannon Sharpe called Julio Jones while live on the show to ask him about the trade rumors, and Julio Jones flat out said that he's out of there, talking about Atlanta, and they also shut down a move to the Cowboys by saying he wanted to be on a winning team. And we don't know if Julio Jones knew that this was on live TV because Shannon Sharpe didn't let him know before Julio Jones started talking, but he did say all that stuff and it's out there. And Ian Rappaport also reported on Monday that Julio had requested a trade a few months ago, and so the Falcons have been listening since then. And with a Julio Jones trade seeming more likely than ever, I wanted to talk through his potential landing spots. And so before the trade rumors, I had Julio Jones ranked as my number 10 wide receiver for 2021. I think people were putting too much stock on his injury-plagued 2020 season, and people were forgetting that from 2014 to 2019, Julio Jones only missed 4 games combined, and his worst receiving yardage season was 1,394 receiving yards. So when Julio Jones is on the field, he's an absolute freak, and I think people were kind of writing him off way too early. I don't think he's washed yet, and I still think he has a lot of juice left in the tank. But let's get into his different landing spots. The current favorite to land Julio Jones right now, it's the New England Patriots, and the Patriots have the cap space to take on Julio Jones' salary, and they're also a playoff caliber team, which Julio Jones has talked about. He wants to go to a winner. But in terms of fantasy football, I think this move is pretty awful for everyone except for Cam Newton and Mac Jones. I think Julio would definitely experience a big downgrade in terms of offense. You go from the Falcons playing in a high-powered passing offense. They just hired Arthur Smith as their head coach, a great offensive mind. You're playing with Matt Ryan, who you know is going to go out there and throw for 4,000 plus yards and has won an MVP in the NFL. And now you're going to a team that's pretty run-heavy. I don't really trust Cam Newton throwing the ball. He may be a decent quarterback for fantasy, but in terms of being a top 20 NFL quarterback, I think Cam Newton is no longer there in his career. And then for the rest of the Patriots' weapons, it's even more of a drop-off for all of them. There was already a lot of uncertainty in that offense before you would add Julio Jones, and so now you have guys like Nelson Aguilar, Jonnu Smith, Hunter Henry, Jacoby Myers, Kendrick Bourne, all of these guys. How are any of them going to get a big enough target share to be fantasy relevant? I just don't think it's going to happen. And so aside from an upgrade for the Patriots quarterbacks, I really do not like this move to the Patriots for anyone else. Another option that's out there right now is the Las Vegas Raiders, and it makes sense because the Raiders are in desperate need of another weapon to pair with Darren Waller, and I don't really think this is a terrible landing spot for Julio Jones. It's definitely not one of the top options, but it's not awful because he would definitely receive a huge target share, and he would be playing with a decently capable quarterback in Derek Carr. I think the player that this hurts the most would definitely be Darren Waller, because right now Darren Waller has value being the clear number 1 in that passing offense. That's the reason why I like him over George Kittle in my tight end rankings. But now if Julio Jones comes in, Waller doesn't have that clear number 1 role in that offense, so his stock would definitely take a hit. And for Derek Carr, it would be an obvious positive. He would get a top weapon, which he really hasn't had at the wide receiver position since Amari Cooper was traded. And for the receivers on the Raiders, I think it would definitely hurt like a late round draft pick for a guy like Henry Ruggs or John Brown. You could spend a late round pick on one of those guys now and hope they break out as a wide receiver 1. But if Julio Jones comes in, I think those guys definitely lose some value as well. So the Raiders, another option, not one of the top options, but definitely something I like a little bit more than the Patriots when I'm looking at Julio Jones' outlook. All right, now we have the Chargers, and this is definitely one of my favorite landing spots for Julio Jones. He would be stepping into an explosive offense and would just create a super powerful 1-2 punch with Keenan Allen. Justin Herbert's fantasy value would absolutely go through the roof. He would automatically be put into my top 5 quarterbacks. I mean, you look at how impressive his rookie season was, and then you look at this Chargers offseason. They've already made huge upgrades to the offensive line, and then you go in and add a top-tier NFL wide receiver. I mean, Justin Herbert would absolutely light it up in 2021. I think Keenan Allen's value would likely drop off a little bit just because he's not the number one anymore. He wouldn't be receiving that same volume, but I don't really think there's a reason to believe that both Keenan Allen and Julio Jones wouldn't both just feast in that offense. So for Julio Jones, if he lands here with the Chargers, he may drop a couple spots in my rankings just because there is that uncertainty of switching teams, but he would definitely still have a ton of potential to finish as a wide receiver 1 in 2021. All right, the last team I'm going to talk about here is the Tennessee Titans, and I think I like this landing spot just as much as I like the Chargers landing spot. I think if this happens, A.J. Brown definitely does not stay in the second round of ADP because you no longer have that hope of him getting a huge target share. You know, A.J. Brown is a big-time playmaker, but now that he's the only clear, capable wide receiver on that team, people think he's going to be able to get a ton of volume to add on to that big playability. And if Julio Jones comes in, he definitely loses that kind of volume hope that you'd have for him. But I think he would still be a top 12 wide receiver. And I think A.J. Brown and Julio Jones could both finish as wide receiver 1s if they're playing together, just like Keenan Allen and Julio Jones have the potential to. And just like Justin Herbert would take a big jump, I think Ryan Tannehill would also have to take a huge jump in my rankings. I'm currently lower on Ryan Tannehill than consensus just because of his lack of weapons. I think it is concerning that he's lost Corey Davis, Adam Humphries, and Jonnu Smith, and they haven't really brought anyone in to replace those guys besides Josh Reynolds. And so I am low on him right now. But if they added Julio, I mean, that would bump him right back into top 12 contention, right around guys like Tom Brady and Matthew Stafford, somewhere in that range. But so the Titans would also be a great landing spot for Julio. All right, so those are all the landing spots I'm going to cover today. It'll definitely be interesting to see how this Julio Jones drama plays out. It's always exciting when you have top-tier NFL players that are on the trade block. It really makes everything interesting, especially for fantasy football. And so I'm excited to see what happens here. If you guys enjoyed the video, please leave a like and subscribe. That really helps the channel out a lot, and I would really appreciate it. And also, let me know your thoughts down below in the comments. Do you think Julio Jones is going to get traded? Where do you want him to get traded? Where do you think he's going to get traded? I'll make sure to get back to you. But thank you guys so much for watching and listening. I'll see you guys tomorrow.